Welcome back to All About the Insight. This week we've been chatting with Nina Illingworth, Director of Insight and Co-Creation at ICE. We've covered lots of fascinating ground, including behavioural science, public health challenges, and the need for continuous adaptation in methodologies. Please enjoy listening. Hi everybody, and welcome to All About the Insight. Our guest today is Nina Illingworth, Director of Insight and Co-Creation at ICE. Hi Nina.
Hi Alex, pleased to be here.
Lovely to have you here. As you know, Nina, this podcast is all about the insight. We love exploring why insights matter, how we can make insights matter more. But let's start off with you. Tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
Okay, a little bit about me. So my journey started when I applied for a job that I knew I couldn't do. And the reason why I knew I couldn't do it, I suppose, is because I applied for a research position at the organisation, but I knew I couldn't do it because I had to go back to university and finish my degree. But instead, I said, how about I come and do a bit of voluntary work for you over the summer? Did that for a couple of weeks, and then that rolled into a part-time position, full-time position, and I'm actually still here 8 years later.
Ah, very good, very good. So it was worth doing it.
Yeah, for sure. So I suppose in short, it started off as a summer internship, and following that curiosity in terms of the insight work that we were doing, it just kept growing and growing and growing, and
Yeah.
I don't think that's stopped. It's certainly not stopped yet.
Well, that certainly, kind of picks up on the, the idea of curiosity. What is it that kept you there, that keeps you there? What is it about insights that appeals to you?
Yeah, so I've always been driven to make a difference in the work that I do, and I suppose my role within behavioural insights within ICE, it's always been about understanding behaviour so that we can influence it for the better, not just for profit. And, someone once said to me many years ago, so I know someone who does what you do, market research, for Smirnoff vodka. And I said, there's a fundamental difference, because their job is to gather customer research to help sell more vodka. And my job is often quite the opposite, because we work within the field of health, of well-being, of lifestyle, and it's actually often to help people drink less vodka.
Yeah. Mind you, it's yeah.
So I suppose just on that, I suppose for me, when I ask myself that question, why insight? Why am I still sticking around doing this? I suppose it's the fact that the work I do really gives me that sense of purpose, that what we're trying to do is engage people in ways that are really meaningful for them, and that we can reach them on their turf, and to really then understand that problem, understand the unmet need from their point of view.
Yeah.
And then we're using that to influence decisions, to policy, service design and intervention. So for me, it's about how insight becomes that bridge from understanding what's going on the ground for people in their realities, and then connecting that to influence real change.
Yeah, definitely. And I do definitely want to explore those ideas of how insight can help. Just tell me a little bit around the kind of current setup and scenario at ICE. How does insight run there?
Yeah, so I guess within the organisation, so the work that we do at ICE is predominantly within health, social care and public sectors. And we're not just a research house, we're a team of behaviour change specialists with expertise in behavioural insights, but also in community engagement, strategy, communications and design and digital. But insight is very much the bedrock of everything that we do, because we use insights to shape and deliver interventions that are informed by our process of design, I suppose, which is what I stands for. So insight, co-creation and engagement. And so it's that idea of gathering a really robust understanding of what's going on so that we can co-create solutions that actually engage people and work to change their behaviour.
And when you talk around co-creation, I have my own understanding of co-creation. Tell me what you understand or how you define co-creation. What is it to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think these terms, so co-creation, co-design, co-production, they often get used interchangeably, and they can be a little bit mixed up. Our understanding really is that co-creation is where you are creating a solution with somebody, you're involving them in that creative process. Co-production goes a little bit further, where you would involve them absolutely end to end, from even designing what our insight brief is. And
Yeah.
I think that is the important distinction, I think, between the co-creation, co-design, and actually co-producing fully end to end.
Yeah. That makes sense. A question pops into my head around in the past. I too worked in social research. We did do peer research in the past. Is that an area that you do anything around, or?
I think peer research for us is I suppose we not necessarily, not strictly. I think for us it's all around the insight that we do is about actually involving and co-creating with the people whose behaviour we want to influence and change. And we really do, I think, pride ourselves on making sure that we can hear from those voices who often go unheard, and reaching marginalised communities who are often underrepresented, and the kind of folks who, with the best will in the world, are not going to come and engage with some of our traditional research methods in terms of, an online group or a survey and that traditional public consultation. So we have to do things a bit differently to go out and gather the insights from them to really amplify their voices, and indeed to then go, we've got this insight, this is what it's telling us, this is where we think we should be going with a solution. Can we now co-create that with you? And it always involves going back out, it involves going into these communities.
Yeah. And you talk around the kind of traditional methods there and whatever, that they aren't necessarily going to be working for you. So what types of, how are you engaging with these folks? What types of things are you doing on the ground?
Yeah, cool. So like I say, I think often when we think about some of these communities, we're talking about people who are living in real deprivation, ethnic minority groups, carers, people with learning disabilities, asylum seekers, refugees, the Gypsy and Roma and traveller community. There are so many barriers that these people face in engaging with a lot of our services, and we as a country, there are a lot of inequalities, and particularly health inequalities. So for us, it's about, we've got to go out there, we've got to go and meet them where they're at. So we're often going out, we're taking the research, whether it be face-to-face survey, short interviews, ethnography. We're going out, we're in food banks, we're in places of worship, we're in the community hubs, we're on the street, we're in bookies and betting shops. Depending on the audience, we will go to them so that we can meet them where they're at.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what does it look like when insights are working for your business?
Cool. So I suppose when insights are working for us, it's that they're actionable, I think. And I think there's a real importance there, because, my view is it's all well and good, gathering a lot of insight and research and writing a long, lengthy report that sits on the proverbial shelf gathering dust. It's that our insights are actionable and can lead to change, essentially. So for me, when we've got it working really well, it doesn't end with that, here's the findings. It doesn't stop, and those insights continue to inform that change. And when our partners and our wider teams are making, developing solutions and shaping services, that we're there as part of that collaborative team to be sense checking. How is this aligned to the insight? Do
Okay.
we now need to go and test that? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
continually evolving, I think, throughout that process.
And that's you speak there around the kind of professional angle of your team and your stakeholders. What's the feedback from the people that you're doing the research with? Do you get feedback there? Do they enjoy it? Do they not enjoy it? Give us a sense of that.
Sure. In terms of the research that we're gathering and insights that we're gathering for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think often the insights that we're gathering, it depends on the topic. We work across a span of it. Some of my interest is, on some of the projects we're working on. How do we stop young people vaping? If it was always meant to be a smoking cessation stuff. How do we stop them? How do we influence people to use A&E appropriately? How do we help professionals join up across organisational boundaries? So often it's some of these challenges that our clients and our partners come in with and going, we're seeing this emerging problem that we think needs change. Can you help us? So often the insights, I think, really help by either validating some of what they perhaps already knew, but actually bringing a different lens to it. And often we're applying behavioural science and theory to that so that it can help understand exactly pinpointing where the problem might be that they need to solve. But they're not, of course, bringing a real novel insights, things that they didn't know, and identifying things that members of their community perhaps need. And as I say, I keep going back to it, influences what they do next.
And you speak there around behavioural science and behavioural science theory. It is, a kind of, it can be a complex area, discipline. Is there an easy way into understanding it? Are there kind of basics around behavioural science? Are there any models or frameworks that you might use? There's about 3 questions in one there, sorry. Take your pick. Take your pick.
That's all right. So we use behavioural science and in a way that triangulates. So we take that approach where we're led by what our insights are telling us, where behavioural science and wider behavioural psychology and other sciences can really help us view those insights through a lens to help us break that down. The most traditional one that is perhaps gold standard and evidence-led is the COMBI-B model. And that outlines that for us to understand and influence somebody's behaviour and for somebody to change their behaviour, they need to have 3 things. They need to have the capability, which is the C in the COMBI-B model, and knowledge about something. They need to have the opportunity, so they need to, that's all the external factors that sit outside an individual, to allow them the opportunity to engage in the desired behaviour that we're striving for. And they need to be more motivated to do it than not. And we know that if somebody has those 3 things, their intention to change increases, and therefore the desired behaviour becomes most likely. And where insight fits in with that is about understanding, okay, what we're seeing from this behaviour, is it a capability and a knowledge thing? Is it because the external environment is so conducive to the undesirable behaviour? Or is it because there are competing motivations? And it really helps us pinpoint exactly what the right problem is to solve.
And, I don't know if you can, but you mentioned, vaping, use of A&E appropriately. Can you put any flesh to what you just described in terms of what's happened on the ground in the past, just to kind of help understand it a bit more?
Yeah, so let me take the vaping example. As I mentioned, vaping is now emerging as quite a prominent public health challenge because a lot of folks, especially young people, are starting to do it when they've never smoked. And go, it was never meant to be for this purpose. Now, when we look at that behaviour, and again, we've been on site in schools, in colleges, we've been outside the local Mackies, which is where they all hang out and vape.
Did you have a Big Mac?
I didn't have one while I was there. And so we gather all that insight in, and then when we look at it through that lens, we start to identify. We go, okay, have these young people got the capability and knowledge to stop vaping? Now, actually, no, they don't at the minute, because they don't understand the harms. They
Mm.
don't understand what the harms are, and the evidence around that's really risky. They also don't always understand the difference between a habit and a nicotine addiction, and the
Hmm.
knowledge of and capability strategies to tackle that. The opportunity when we think about external factors, the external environment around those young people is actually really conducive to them vaping. It's really cool. Everybody else does it. It's
Mm.
dead easy to get them because there's about 3 vape shops on the
Yeah,
corner
yeah.
of the street. And like I say, everyone's doing it. And then the motivation is, well, I do it to fit in. It's actually, it gives me that stress relief and relaxes me. And actually, people keep going on that vapes are actually quite healthy. So I'm not really motivated to quit because I don't see the reason to. So all of a sudden, you break that insight down so
Yeah.
that then our strategies can be really targeted.
Yeah, yeah, that's as you say, because often, and we do a lot of kind of online communities, and you get this avalanche of insight, don't you? So actually, breaking it down, chunking it down, can be really helpful using perhaps a model like that.
Yeah.
That,
The
yeah.
other thing I will say, Alex, on that as well is I've used the example of Combi B, but there are so many other different frameworks and models
Hmm.
and theories that we draw upon, and that I would encourage anyone out there using insights to be thinking about. And the other thing that plays into this for me is around how we can understand a behaviour and develop solutions in a way where we work with the brain in mind. So we
Hmm.
think about some of the cognitive biases that people have in that influences their decision making process. We often like to think that we are very rational human beings making rational decisions all
Hmm.
of the time, but often we're quite irrational, and that's very much influenced by what's going on in the brain and
Yeah,
some
yeah.
of those biases that are playing out. So if we can better understand those, that can help them as well. Just give us that additional layer of insight into what we're seeing.
And are there any, you talk around different models, frameworks, all the different biases. Are there any kind of good resources to kind of look at these things, that we can check out?
One of my favourites, I would check out the decisionlab.com.
Hmm.
And there
Hmm.
is a full list there of all the cognitive biases and heuristics. I'm sure Alex, you'll stick a link somewhere alongside our chat. But that's really, really useful, I think, to actually understand the different things that are going on in the
Yeah.
brain, which makes us irrational beings.
So yes, that all makes sense. And as you say, I think there's a classic schematic of all those different biases and the like. How do we know what bias is relevant? Which one should we be looking at? We could go down the list and say, I'll have this one, this one, and this one. How do we streamline that and make it more focused?
So I guess that's where some of the expertise comes in, and
Hmm.
when you bring in behavioural scientists who work with this. But what I would say is, in terms of a bit of a tip, is that you've got to be led by what the insight's telling you. So
Hmm.
taking what we'll call an inductive approach. So not starting with the model and going, yes, this has to be combi B, or it has to be this particular cognitive bias that I must draw upon. Start with the insight. Start with what people are telling you about the
Hmm.
behaviour. And I would often take either a blended qualitative and quantitative approach to do that. And then once you've got that, it's then about leaning on those other resources that may or may
Yeah.
not help you. But I think that some of that comes with practice and knowing
Yeah.
when to apply some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So you've done a project, you've engaged with unheard communities. think about the back end, how do you go about embedding your insights? How do you go about applying them and making them make a difference to your client, or really landing them with your clients?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of how we help our insights land, I think it goes back to that point I made around we can't write lengthy, long research reports
Mm-hmm.
that are inaccessible and that use very complex language. I think our role as insight practitioners is around grappling with complexity, and particularly when we're talking about human behaviour,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
humans are messy.
yeah.
There's lots going on. There's lots of competing factors, and it can be quite complex. And then there can be a lot of nuances between cohorts of a target audience, for instance. So I think our job is really about taking complexity
Mm,
and all what's going on and simplifying it and trying to help break it down and help people fully understand
mm, mm.
not only what's going on, what's the challenge, but what's the opportunity, and now so what can I do about it? And I think that's where, again, as insight practitioners, we need to be thinking about what's the story that we want to tell.
Yeah.
How does this all connect up, rather than it all being siloed chunks of the research, I suppose, is
Mm.
absolutely key.
Yeah, and definitely something that we that we all face, as you say, to kind of tell that story. That's a challenge for us in everything that we do. When you think around the complexity of behavioural science, different cognitive biases. Are there any, and there may be other challenges, but when you are engaging, discussing, negotiating with your clients, are there any challenges that you see there or that you experience in trying to explain what you're doing, or really give a good overview of how you want to progress?
Yeah, I suppose. I guess it depends on the nature of the project. I think sometimes within research it can
Mm.
it can be about this is the brief, there's a challenge, can we want to understand what's going on, we're going to go out and do these particular research activities, we're going to come back, we're going to analyze it, and we're going to share back a real rich synthesis of that insight on what we recommend you do next. That is often fairly straightforward. I suppose sometimes the challenge can be if we take it into that co-creation space,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
because sometimes, and into developing solutions, and some of our work is around actually designing insight-led interventions and piloting them at small scale and then evaluating their effectiveness, because I think
Yeah.
evaluation is a really important string to the bow of insight.
Mm.
And sometimes we have to allow for a level of flexibility because we don't know what that intervention's going to be at the start, because it's going to be led
Yeah.
by the insight
Yeah.
and that journey of co-creation. So we've got to often help our clients and our partners come along that journey with us, and
Mm.
stand beside them shoulder to shoulder to see what we're doing, and help as they evolve and move through some of that uncertainty, because often what we're trying to do is use those insights to lead to
Yeah.
something that's going to
Yeah.
change, but we don't know what that something's going to be just
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. That end point is, as you say, not yet defined. And when you're trying to walk your clients figuratively and perhaps literally as well through a process, are there any ways in which you've built positive relationships with clients or effective relationships? Any particular ways in which we could all look to improve there?
Yeah, so how do we improve? So I think it goes back to taking a partnership approach,
Mm.
and actually the principle that we would apply when we're going to speak to members of the Eastern European community within a Polish school, we're always seeking to put ourselves in their shoes and
Yeah.
understand their world. The same principle applies going out to that Polish school, and as it does to actually understanding our clients and putting ourselves into their shoes and understanding, okay, what's their context here?
Yeah.
What is the system challenges that's driving this piece of work? What is the end goal here? And I think when we take that partnership approach to truly understand their needs,
Yeah.
and then work in a way that has a very clear and robust plan and monitoring and all the project management that would sit around that, but while allowing for flexibility but transparency and creativity within that, I suppose, is the approach that I would say we'd need to take.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense in terms of everybody's operating in a context, be it the research participants, us, clients, and really fully appreciating that makes a lot of sense, as you say.
Yeah.
We've heard about your journey, we've heard about what you do now, some of the different tools and methods that you might use. Obviously, research, insights is at an interesting time, it's a state of flux potentially, plenty of things going on. As you look to the future for insights, what do you see transpiring, in terms of the future? I'm not asking you to, I'm not going to hold you to these predictions, but but what do you see, as the insights industry moves forward? What's going to be important? What's going to be less important? How will it evolve?
Yeah, I think the obvious one, which no doubt is already in people's minds, I suppose, is around the emerging technologies and the use of AI, particularly around synthetic data that could potentially come in and be used in the insight field. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with some of that. I definitely think that, again, we're starting to use tools like ChatGPT and Copilot to help with efficiencies, but actually there is perhaps a broader piece for insight, and I definitely think we're at the tip of the iceberg with that.
Yeah, AI is obviously the one thing everybody's grappling with at the minute.
Yeah,
from a more,
exactly.
Yeah, from a go.
I was just going to say, they say that AI is not going to take our jobs, but people who can use AI in a way that's ethical, reliable, and do it well, those are the ones we need to be watching out for. And actually, we need to be working towards that ourselves, to stay ahead of the curve for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to the MRS conference a few months ago, and one of the keynote speakers was very clear, very adamant around the fact that disruption happens, change happens. It's happening now. It happens quickly, and we need to recognise that and be on top of it. Because if we don't, we'll just get left behind.
Absolutely, and I think it goes back to perhaps the other point I was going to make when thinking about the future, is that our understanding of the world needs to constantly evolve to keep up with it. And something that we understood about behaviour, yes, some of it can be transferred forward, but problems change and evolve, and as do the need for some of our approaches and methodologies. Balancing the traditional methodologies, but being able to respond to a changing world.
And just on that changing world, and again, this is somewhat political with a small p, but social question. What are you seeing any trends in kind of what's happening in society at the minute? From your work or the requests for work that you're getting.
I mean, so many, I suppose, changes. There's the topical change. So again, that's a good example from the example I used around vaping. The public health challenge of the day used to be smoking, and still is a little bit, but vaping is now emerging. So topically, we're seeing things shift, but we are now starting to see that there is an appetite for working differently. So for systems and for organisations to be working across boundaries together to deliver solutions, particularly in the field of health and care and the public sector. And actually, so it's not only gathering the insight to understand how are we working now and how do we want to work in future, but actually, again, stepping into that co-creation space to actually co-create and actually deliver solutions and evaluate them. And so, as I said earlier, and that in that regard, insight just becomes that thread that weaves throughout.
Yeah, kind of constant learning as well as learning and adapting.
Yeah, for sure.
Nina, I've loved this conversation. I think it's been fascinating. Nina, that has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Just remains for me to say thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very much.